Hi, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Summer.
Hi, Nancy.
I sent you that email today, and when I sent it, I was going to say, Annika, are you there or not there? And then I got the return. So I was like, well, that answered that question.
Yeah, she's officially on parental leave. When I have more fun updates like a photo, I'll make sure to share it with the group because I know everyone will want to see that. Hey, Annette.
Did she have the baby?
She was induced on Saturday, so we haven't heard anything. It was like planned, but
Okay.
so anyway, I'll wait till we have like the photos and everything to share more. But
Okay.
she's officially on leave. Yeah, we're trying to leave her alone. Yeah.
Do you guys know, do my PowerPoints have to be in the Google Drive to be able to present, or can I just present normally?
You should be able to present PowerPoints, but if you have any issues, I downloaded it too, Annette, so I can always, in case you have any issues. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I don't know why, but I still struggle with technology.
I know every system works slightly differently, so yeah. Hi, Heather. Hi, Michelle. All right.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Summer.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Diana. Good to see you.
All right, we're officially at 1, so maybe I'll start sharing the slides and we can jump into the agenda, knowing that more people are going to join as we get started here. All right. Okay, so we can jump right into the agenda. Before I do the roll call, I'll hand it over to Heather and Michelle. And I guess I should probably introduce myself too, because I'm not the face that people are used to seeing, but I'm Summer Modelfino. I'm the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer. I'm covering for Annika Lefebvre while she's on parental leave. So, you know, hopefully so far so good, but bear with me for what I'm sure will be a slightly, you know, lower quality of hosting. And with that, I will hand it over to Heather and Michelle, our co-chairs.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Heather Breskin. I am a member of the FSRC and co-chair with Michelle of this committee. And in my professional role, I am the director of Montgomery County's Office of Food Systems Resilience. So thanks, everybody, for being with us today as we continue chugging along in the General Assembly session and have some important updates, and looking forward to hearing everyone's input and updates as well. Michelle?
Hi, everyone. Michelle Caruso. I am here representing the Frederick County Food Council at the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. And, you know, excited to, continue the exciting discussions about what's happening in Annapolis. And I think I've really enjoyed the productive and, Q&A that we've been able to have the last few weeks. And, I really appreciate learning from everyone's expertise on this call. And that's sort of the theme. If you're new here, is we're, trying to better understand what's going on during the state legislative session and utilize the expertise of the folks on the call. Or, even after the call, asking folks questions and being able to share updates with this group so that we can all be informed advocates or informed folks who are just interested in food systems within the state of Maryland. So with that, back to Heather, I think, or back to Summer for roll call. It's probably actually the correct next step.
Yep, we will jump into roll call real quick. And I'm just going to go through the list of voting members of this committee. So we've already got Heather and Michelle. Is anyone here from Senator Hester's office? Okay. Let's see. LaMonica Jones. Dr. Lansing. Okay. And I can see Steve McHenry is here. Hello, Steve. Nancy, I can see that you're here. Camille Range. And Diana, I can see that you're here. Okay, great. So now that we have got the roll call taken care of, we'll go through a couple quick announcements and then we'll hand it over like we usually do to the CHHS team to do a bill review. Today, we are actually joined by Annette Hallberg, who works really closely with Ben, who many of you are familiar with. Ben is actually not here because very appropriately, he is testifying today. So he is in Annapolis. We were hoping we might get him in the hallway doing kind of a live news reporter thing, but we have something even better, which is Annette. And then after that, we'll just get into any next steps and we'll close out the meeting. So we've already covered our welcome. The announcements are really just the upcoming meetings. For anyone who has not looked at the calendar recently, we've got a meeting coming up this week for the Environment and Production Committee. That'll be on Thursday. In that, we'll talk a bit about the ad hoc work group progress for the report that's coming out later this year. As you all know, we have these meetings on a weekly basis, so same time, same place next Monday. And then later in the month, we've got our next Distribution and Access Committee meeting. So that'll be Thursday, March 27th at 1 p.m. And the next full FSRC council meeting is on April 17th from 10 a.m. to noon. That one is kind of relevant for this group because we'll be doing a session debrief, which for those of you who attended last year, CHHS does a great job of kind of walking us through the status of a lot of the pieces of legislation that are discussed in these meetings. This we all know, that's just information on how to join these meetings. And with that, as I mentioned, it's not actually Ben today, it's Annette. So I'll hand it over to you, Annette. And if you have any issues sharing, just let me know and I can share your slides for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Summer. Bear with me here. Okay. Can we all see the screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. As Summer said, my name is Annette Hallberg, and I'm a research assistant with the Center for Health and Homeland Security this semester. I'm not quite as much of an expert as Ben Yellen, but I will do my best in his place. And I see we have a question.
Annette, can you make it just a little bit bigger?
Oh,
My
yes.
eyes are old.
Of course. Let me see if I can. How's that?
Yes.
A little bit better?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Of
thank
course.
you.
Of course. Okay, wonderful. So we'll just go ahead and dive right in. As always, these are our tracking resources. So we have a spreadsheet that I update daily with the progress of all of our bills that are kind of tangentially related to food resiliency and also our priority bills that we go over here in these meetings every Monday. We also have a Google Calendar if you prefer to see the hearings laid out that way. A few things on our timeline. We have passed the final date for introduction of bills without suspension of rules. And so our next upcoming deadline will be next Monday. And that is when bills have to cross over. So that's our crossover deadline. So we are expecting to see quite a few progressions this week. And again, so just keep checking that spreadsheet because we'll have them all there for you guys. Okay, this week's priority legislation, we just have one new bill to go over, and it's a very small change. This is SB 1042, Prince George's County Property Tax Credit for Grocery Stores Alterations. This was sponsored by Senator Benson, and it's just a one-word change from authorizing the Prince George's County to grant a property tax to requiring them to do so. And because this was introduced after the deadline, it is currently in the Rules Committee. And so for those of you who don't know, all that means is that it's currently in the Rules Committee. They will have to vote to move it forward. And at that time, it will be assigned to a regular committee. And then it will go through the normal process of having a hearing and then being voted on if it will move forward. So it still has a chance, but it just has a few more obstacles to go through. Any questions, insights, or comments on this new bill? Okay,
I do
seeing-
have a question.
Yes.
Is this being treated as if it's a pilot tax? And if it does work there, they could extend it statewide, or is it this just only for Prince George's County specifically? Thank you very much.
I don't know if anybody has a better answer. I can take a stab at it, but I don't know if anyone else has more insight.
There was a similar bill like this one, and I don't remember the number that was for Anne Arundel County.
Yes, this one is specific for Prince George's. I can answer that for sure. And I agree with Diana that I remember one that was specific to Anne Arundel, and we can definitely look back and see. But if I remember, Diana, that one was not moving forward. If that rings a bell for you, so we can.
I think you're right, Heather.
For homework, we can check on the status of Anne Arundel, and this one is specific for Prince George's. And Annette, you may have additional context to add related to Serge's other question about a pilot. I'm not sure.
I do not have any information on it if it's a pilot program, but we can definitely look into that.
I don't believe it's a pilot program. It's just a change to county law.
Wonderful. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. So we have just one hearing coming up this week, and that will be for House Bill 1449. I believe we went over this either last week or a couple weeks ago. This is the Public Health Milk Products Direct-to-Consumer Sale of Raw Milk bill, and that has a hearing today actually at 1 p.m. So this excludes the sale of raw milk by a holder of a permit for human consumption from state regulations, and just adds in a few other requirements for permits to sell raw milk. Any questions or insight on this? If anyone's testifying on this, they would probably not be on this call, hopefully. But if there's any comments or questions.
I can tell you that the state health department is opposed to the bill, but some of the farming community is supportive, including Maryland Farm Bureau.
Thanks, Steve. And this does not have a cross file, is that right?
Correct. Wonderful. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. This is Mark Powell at MDA. I would say that the governor's Dairy Advisory Council is opposed to sale of raw milk. Just so you know.
Thanks, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. So last week we had several priority hearings, so we'll go ahead and give you guys an update on those. First, we have SB 353 and House Bill 1434. So it had its hearing in the House. There was a comment from Vice Chair Boyce that referred Delegate Ampry to House Bill 9, which we have also been tracking. And she specifically directed him to how it changes the definition of a food desert. And there was a question from Delegate Morgan on kind of why we think there are a lot of food deserts in Baltimore City. And Delegate Ampry answered that basically just based on the different metrics that grocery stores use, based on density and sometimes education levels. And I know that there have been a lot of conversations kind of happening behind the scenes regarding the FSRC's role in this work group. And so I wanted to open it up to Heather, Summer, or Michelle if you guys wanted to provide a little bit more insight on those talks.
Sure, not too much to say. Exactly what it says on the slide. As of now, this bill would just require or designate basically somebody from FSRC as designated by Secretary Strickland to be part of this work group if it were established. That's the main thing to be aware of in terms of FSRC role as written right now. And we're paying attention to see if you know, where this goes. And I know this group has talked about some, potential overlap with existing scope, and that's something that we're happy to keep communicating, definitely. But Heather, not sure if there's anything you would add to that.
No, I think it's just an interesting exploration of consolidating and centering all the various food-related work that's happening in the state and with the FSRC, and also some interesting conversations which has been explored in other bills too, related to definitions of food deserts or healthy food priority areas. And so I think it has been a meaningful opportunity to connect folks around those two topics. Thanks, Summer.
Wonderful. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on this bill? Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move on to a very, very packed and long hearing that happened this week. This is House Bill 1469, the Sugary Beverage Tax, or For Our Kids Act. This bill would impose a tax and an obligation to register and file with the comptroller for manufacturers or wholesale dealers who receive, store, or manufacture packaged sugary beverages, syrups, or powders for sale. And so I think ultimately the rate of sugary beverage distributor tax would be 2 cents per ounce of sugary beverages sold to a retailer for sale in Maryland to a consumer, and produced from the syrup or powder based on the larger of either the largest volume resulting from the use of syrup or the actual volume produced by the retailer as recently determined by the comptroller. So this had its hearing last week. The hearing was about over 2 hours long, so this is just a very high-level overview, but there were a few people who testified in support, such as Ricara Jones, the Political Action Chair for Maryland State Conference, NAACP, and then a lot of people testified in opposition or expressed concerns. So Delegate Wilkins, Jim Pica, who's the attorney for Royal Farms, Marshall Klein, president of Klein ShopRite grocery stores. Their main concerns were just that this would lead to a loss of jobs and significantly decrease the amount of sales of these products in their stores, and that they cited that in other states where this has happened, they saw job loss and loss of revenue. There was a question from the House Minority Leader about what other drinks the tax might apply to, such as protein drinks or others with artificial sweeteners. And the answer is that it would apply to any drink with artificial sweeteners, obviously, other than what's exempted in the bill. And another question from Delegate Arntz, is this a tax on everyone? No, it would obviously just be a tax for people who went to purchase these drinks. And a few updates on the fiscal and policy note. The tax would increase annually starting July 1st, 2027. It is expected to raise $500 million in revenue, $189 million of which would be used for the CEP expansion, which we'll cover next because that also had a hearing this week. And then it would go to a few other healthy food initiatives, and the balance then would go to the state's general fund. So I know this was a very big bill. If anybody has any questions, insights, comments, please feel free to share.
Just point of information that I think will be of some interest. The Southern Maryland Ag Development Commission, which administers the Maryland Market Money Program, is seeking $1 million from this source of funding to add to their incentive funding for the federal nutrition benefits that are offered at farmers markets. I think they were not clear on how they could request that support as part of the process, but I know they've reached out to Delegate Charkoudian this morning, and I think they're also reaching out to the committee chair as well to seek that support.
That makes a lot of sense considering that they work in a field where people are suffering the consequences if you have sugary drinks. So healthier foods, healthier drinks, and it's a very good source of funding.
Thank you. I saw some hands raised, and I appreciate folks. I know that this is a hot topic, so if we could use the raise hand function to participate. I saw Ann first and then Diana, so go ahead, Ann.
Hi, just a point of small clarification. The $189 million would fund school, I think they call it universal school meals. So every single student, breakfast, lunch, regardless of income, all over the state, 100%, well, basically 100% state funded. The CEP expansion bill that we were working really hard on as the Maryland Food Bank is a much more pared down, and it's basically a state supplement to allow more schools to implement the CEP program, which is a federal program. So just that little point of clarification, it's actually like two different initiatives there.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, I noticed that large number and was guessing that was the case. So I appreciate you clarifying. Diana?
Yes, I was just going to, thank you, Anne. I was going to make that same clarification. And my understanding that some of it, before it would go into general funds, would also go for childcare scholarships.
Thank you. I think Heather has kind of dropped off and come back and then maybe froze. Okay, she's back. So I don't see any other hands. Are there any other comments on this bill before we keep moving? Heather?
Yeah, Michelle, thanks. I think I'm back. I would just observe, kind of building on what Steve shared, that I think it is an interesting, possibility of funding for a wide variety of initiatives, both food related and otherwise. And certainly you've seen that in other jurisdictions tied to a wide variety of youth health and food related purposes. So Steve, I don't know if the sponsors have been engaged yet in any discussions related to, how the funding would be potentially divvied up. But I think that will definitely be a space that we'll be watching closely, because I think it will be interesting to see how that process unfolds.
Yeah, all I can observe is what I heard during the hearing. I did listen to the hearing. There was mention of the need for more support in food deserts, and how some of those resources could be used in that context. And then one of the members of the committee also asked, given the large proposed either reductions in funding to the county governments or the cost shifting from the state to the county governments for various things, that could a share of this unallocated new funding be shared with the local governments, principally the counties. So you have a fairly large pot of money unallocated, and so I think a lot of people are going to have their hands out.
Agreed. Thanks, Steve.
Perfect. Any other questions or insights or anything on this bill?
I'll look for it and put it in the chat, but there was a good Maryland Matters summary article of the hearing as well that would be worth reading for those who want to learn more and maybe don't have time to watch the whole hearing.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Okay, so next is Senate Bill 769 and House Bill 1254. It had its hearing in the House last week as well. This is the CEP expansion program. Laura Hale, the Director of Government Relations with the American Heart Association, and Larset, who we have on the phone call with us today, the VP of the Maryland Food Bank, Julia Gross, Senior Associate of Child Nutrition with Maryland Hunger Solutions, Elizabeth Davis, a pediatric resident physician at Children's National Hospital, all testified in support of the bill. There was one question about what the funding mechanism for the program is, and I think we talked about this just in the last slide, but some of the funding, I believe, would come from the revenue from HB 1469, but again, I don't know if anyone wants to kind of correct that based on what we just heard about the other bill.
So a question or a point then, if that bill, if HB 469 is passed, do we even need the CEP bill, because 469 is intended to fund universal meals?
Yes, I see, Anne, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think logically, no, the CEP bill would not be needed. From what I'm hearing, and this is just an interesting week before crossover, a lot of this is just in the hands of the committee. I think that sugary beverage taxes has just so much money in it that it's just going to be which priorities get peppered into it. The reason that the CEP bill is, CEP bill was so interesting for us is it's basically the universal school meals that we advocated for the past 4 or 5 years, with that large $189 million fiscal note, pared down significantly to $10 million as kind of like a, first step into it, which is why we're at least keeping the conversation going on that bill, with the knowledge that, the full feed every kid breakfast and lunch at no cost is also on the table for legislators to continue, if that makes sense.
I'll ask a question, and I don't know if you're best positioned to answer it, but I'm curious if there have been, internally or externally conversations related to if CEP eligibility definition shift at the federal level, what that would mean for this legislation, and would it nullify it or make it less effective, or make this more important than in normal circumstances even?
Yeah, we're prepared to amend this bill to make, if something happens to CEP, say it goes back up to 40, which would be best case scenario, say it goes up to 60, which is what we've heard. We're prepared to amend this bill to make it extremely general, that MSD could use this to fund any school that is interested in CEP, in an attempt to kind of capture the schools that maybe might fall off of CEP that are currently in it, to just keep some sort of stability there. So at this point, we're putting in the bill with the information that we know right now and we have, but the intention really is to maximize CEP in whichever way MSD thinks is best to do that.
Thanks, Anne. Leslie?
Just as a segue to that, I earlier put in information that I didn't mean to put in at that time. I was just preparing it, and somehow I hit something and it went sent. The point that I'm trying to make is that I wonder if in general it's of any value for the council to consider some of the items in the Project 2025 that may actually impact the work of the council. CEP is just one of them. So I put some links there, and if you think there's some value, maybe Ben or someone from his team can do a synopsis, and we can, kind of talk about these, because there may be some other strategies you may need to consider based upon what might be coming down the pike.
Yeah, thanks so much, Leslie. I will make sure that we connect with Summer and defer to the MDEM team, I think, on how to approach that. But I'm sure that's something that the leadership team could explore how best to connect its members on.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. The next bill that had a hearing this week was Senate Bill 960. That is the cross-filed to House Bill 1249. This is the Natural Resources Blue Catfish Population Control Bill, which just adds language for some things surrounding catching blue catfish. So Robert Brown, president of the Maryland Watermen's Association, Nick Hargrove, owner of Tomaman Island Seafood, both testified in support. And Senator Carrozza had a question asking if if the senators worked with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to create the provision, kind of setting the length at 2,400 feet in length for the thin fish trot line. And the answer is no, that was a number that was proposed by commercial blue catfish fishermen. Any insights, questions, or comments on this bill or this hearing this week? Yes, Mark.
Just to let you guys know, it also requires us at MDA Marketing to prepare a report on the blue catfish population and the market for it, and sort of the efforts that we have underway to increase sales of the fish due by September. So you know.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, next we have Senate Bill 428 and House Bill 506. This is the Chesapeake Bay Legacy Act. This past week, it had its hearing in the House. There were several testimonies in support. Saif Ratul, the Deputy Legislative Officer for Governor Moore's office, Secretary Kevin Addix, the Maryland Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Josh Kurtz, the Maryland Secretary of Natural Resources, Ward Slaken, the Executive Director of Oyster Recovery Partnership, Kim Coble, who's the Executive Director of Maryland League of Conservation Leaders, Lindsay Thompson on behalf of Maryland Grain Producers, Holly Porter, Executive Director of Delmarva Chicken Association, and Jim Mullen with the Maryland Oyster Association all testified in support. There was also some testimony in support with amendments from Jeannie Hadaway, Riccio, the former DNR secretary on behalf of Talbot Waterman Association, and then Jeff Harrison, who's the president of the Talbot Waterman Association, Robert Brown, the president of Maryland Watermen's Association, and then Jim Mullen with Maryland Oysterman Association, and Tim Mortis with the Cecil Hartford Watermen's Association, all testified in support with amendments. And then a small update from when it had its hearing in the Senate. Robert Newberry, who's the chairman of Delmarva Fisheries Association, when he testified for the bill in the Senate, he testified in opposition. He has now changed his testimony to testify in support, but with amendments. There were some questions from Delegate Jacobs with concerns about the word shall regarding the Atlantic State Marine Fishery Commission, saying that they shall manage those species. He cited precedent that other states have used the word may. He also asked if the charter boat industry had been involved in drafting the bill. The answer to that question was that they used shall because the Interstate Commerce Pact does not take away, they use the word shall because that was in the Interstate Commerce Pact, and that it does not take away the ability to repeal or anything. It just aligns with ASFMC code. And for the charter boats, they said that they had requested sector separation, recognizing the charter boat and recreation industry is separate, but they would consider including more language for the charter boat industry. There was also a question about federal funding for this bill, and the answer is that it does include a grant from NOAA to the Department of Natural Resources. So any questions, comments, concerns on this bill?
That was a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think we're all processing. I know there's a lot in that bill. So if any of our resident, ag experts on the call have any additional comments that they think would be relevant for this group to know about, I think we're happy to hear from them. And I see Steve coming on camera. So you were one of those people I had in mind. So thank you, Steve.
Yeah, you heard reference to the amendments that the watermen are now endorsing. The fisheries component of the bill has been substantially revised with amendments worked out with the administration and DNR. And so the watermen's communities are now supporting that portion of the bill. The MDA's LEAF program is another component in the bill, and that has broad support in the agricultural community. So I think there's very little opposition at this point, unless Mark Powell knows differently.
I'm not aware of any opposition from agriculture side. Essentially, the goal is to reward farmers who go outside of the, do extra things like, for example, participate in farmers markets, FMP program, work with food banks, for example, things like that. They would all these things would be recognized in a system that we would use to promote them, basically.
Thanks for that additional context. And yes, thank you, Annette, for the excellent summary, as Heather pointed out in the chat. Just a quick, since we have folks on the call, if you haven't introduced yourself yet in the chat, please feel free to do so we know everyone that's here. So thanks everyone who's done that already. Annette, I think back to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Yes, and I think this is also a good time just to remind everyone that we do send these slides out. So I know this is kind of a wall of text, but we will be sending all of this out so you guys have some time to absorb all this information. Looks like the last hearing we had last week was for House Bill 397 and Senate Bill 363. This is the Maryland Agriculture and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation Oyster Shucking House Loan Program. It has already passed in the House. So the House bill passed third reading 126-8, and it is now in the Senate on first reading. But the Senate bill cross-file just had its hearing last week, and our own Steve McHenry, representing Marbidco, testified in support, as well as Benjamin Ford, who's the Miles Y River keeper with Shore Rivers. And it was a pretty straightforward hearing, but Mr. McHenry, if you wanted to add anything, we would be happy to hear from you.
No, DNR supports it. A number of groups support it. Pretty straightforward bill. I expect it to move at the appropriate time. I will note that the Senate committee, the EEE committee, has the most number of Senate bills, so they're working overtime right now. And it wouldn't surprise me if they acted on other bills before ours, or the Senate version of this bill, especially since they have the cross-file House bill now in their possession.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on this bill? Okay, wonderful. That concludes our hearings for last week. So we just have a few updates on priority legislation that has passed its original chamber. We have the Department of Human Services Federal Commodity Supplemental Food Program Administration the House bill for this already passed its original chamber last week, but this week the Senate bill also passed its original House. So SB 445 passed third reading 43-0 and is now in the House on first reading. Also new this week, Procurement, State Department of Education, Control Authority, and Local Food Purchasing. So HB 56, that passed its original chamber 135-1, and it is now in the Senate on first reading in Budget and Taxation. Also new last week was Maryland Agriculture and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation Oyster Shucking House Loan Program. HB 397 passed 126-8, is now in the Senate on first reading. And I believe we went over all of these last week, but I'll go through them very, very quickly. SB 131 has also passed and is now in the House on first reading. Senate Bill 226, which is cross-filed with House Bill 104, have both passed their original chambers and have now swapped. So the Senate bill is in the House and the House bill is in the Senate. The Department of Agriculture, Maryland Agriculture Commission, and Young Farmers, both of those bills, SB 240 and its cross-file House Bill 262, have also passed their original chamber and are now in the opposite chamber. Public Safety Food System Resiliency Council Definitions and Reports, that's House Bill 9. That passed the House 127-9 and is still in the Senate on first reading. And then Baby Food Labeling Statement Regarding Toxic Heavy Metal Testing, that's House Bill 443. That has passed its original chamber 132-0 and is in the Senate on first reading. So we wanted to give you guys a few updates on priority legislation that we have tracked, that has had hearings, but that hasn't moved since then. So I will say for these slides, this might be a little confusing, but we did not include bills that they themselves maybe have not moved since their hearing, but have cross files that have passed their original chamber. So we do just encourage you guys to keep going to our spreadsheet that lays everything out. So if you're curious about the status of a bill, it is updated daily. And so if you don't see a change in the bill, that means that it just hasn't changed. But we did want to provide you guys just some updates. So House Bill 42, which is cross-filed with Senate Bill 134, that's the solid waste disposal surcharge and wasted food reduction. This had a hearing in the House on January 29th and a hearing in the Senate on February 11th. Neither bill has moved since their hearing. House Bill 257 and 317, that's the Natural Resources, Food, Forest, and Foraging Program. Again, in the House, it had its hearing on January 29th and a hearing in the Senate on February 11th, and neither of those bills have moved since their hearings. Senate Bill 703, which is cross-filed with House Bill 881. That's the Family Investment Program and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits. The Senate bill had its hearing February 19th, and the House had its hearing February 25th. So not too long ago, but again, neither of those bills have moved since. House Bill 907, that's the property tax credit, that had a hearing in the House on February 18th and has not moved forward since then. House Bill 1249 and Senate Bill 960, that's the Natural Resources Blue Catfish bill that we've talked about. The House had its hearing on 228 and has not moved, but I will say that the Senate bill just had its hearing, so it is still kind of getting some action in some way. Senate Bill 701, that is the cottage food products, non-potentially hazardous foods. That just had its hearing on February 28th. So again, not too long ago, and that was a Senate hearing, not a House hearing, sorry. Had its hearing in the Senate on 228, but has not moved since then. Senate Bill 353 and House Bill 1434, again, we talked about that this week, but did just want to flag that the Senate bill has not moved since its hearing on February 6th, even though the House did just have its hearing this past week. Senate Bill 428 and House Bill 506, again, talked about that this week, the Chesapeake Bay Legacy Act. The Senate bill had its hearing February 11th and has not moved since then, but the House bill did just have its hearing this week. And again, a bill that we talked about this week, Senate Bill 769, cross-filed with House Bill 1254. That's the CEP expansion program. Senate Bill 769 had its hearing on February 26th, but has not moved, even though the House cross-file just had its hearing. And then finally, we have Senate Bill 789. That's the Higher Education Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program. That had its hearing February 21st in the Senate and has not moved since then. Again, I know that's a lot of information, so any questions, concerns, or insights into any of these bills and their status, please feel free to share those.
Thanks, Annette. I know that was a lot of information that you covered very efficiently. So if folks have any questions, comments, now's the time. And again, as Annette said, these slides will be shared for folks to reference afterward. All right, Annette, back to you.
Perfect. And I will just say, just because these have not moved yet does not mean that they will not move. So again, we are expecting a lot of bills to have something happen this week, with the crossover date being next Monday. So just because they haven't yet doesn't mean that they are dead in the water, but we are just keeping an eye on them. Then we do have some priority legislation that has been withdrawn. So we have the on-farm home processing license that was filed in the Senate and the House, and both bills have been withdrawn by their sponsor. So that's Senate Bill 481 and House Bill 989. Public health, food, and milk product labeling, that was House Bill 8, that has also been withdrawn by its sponsor. And then new this week that we have not been tracking, but that we did want to flag for everybody is Senate Bill 824. So this bill has already been withdrawn by its sponsor. This was the alcoholic beverages prohibition on Class A licenses for chain stores, supermarkets, and discount houses. And it would be repealing language. And so we know that people had expressed interest in this bill and that the governor himself had also been interested in it, but we did want to share that it has been withdrawn, so it will not be moving forward. If anyone has any questions, concerns, or comments on this one. Okay, seeing nothing. Going to go very quickly through the budget. Not a lot of updates this week, except that Maryland has to come up with $280 million more in cuts to its budget. And the House is working on their budget proposal. And then the only other thing here is that we are kind of waiting to see what the federal government does on Friday as they face another government shutdown with their budget. So this is not my area of expertise, but if anyone has any comments, questions, or insights on the budget that they would like to share, that would be a great time.
Ned, I have just an update kind of building on the last two slides, because in last week's meeting, there was a question that came up on why House Bill 175 was withdrawn, and that, just for reference, was the bill about restoration and receipt of benefits from EBT cards. So basically, SNAP theft. And so we reached out to DHS for an update. And basically it was withdrawn as there was, through the BRFA amendment, the issue was addressed. And so basically it was internally sorted out and didn't need legislation to codify the response. So just wanted to kind of circle back on that, because that is specific to the BRFA and a withdrawn bill.
Yeah, and just to comment a little bit on the budget process, as we discussed last week, in normal years, the House Appropriations and the House of Delegates would act first on the budget and then send it over to the Senate, and they would act second. So in a normal year, the House Appropriations Committee would be having subcommittee markup sessions this week, with the full committee voting the budget out by the end of the week. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. In fact, the House and the Senate are pretty far apart on how they view the need for new revenues and what the new revenues would look like, and the magnitude of the new revenues that would be needed to save some of the programs that are proposed to be cut, including all of the land preservation, all the easement purchase, and a good chunk of the land purchase programs came up last week. So word on the street today is the Senate may actually move the budget first, which would be a departure with tradition. And the Senate's posture would be to cut more than what the House would propose to cut. So what's that's worth, who knows? We're in basically an unprecedented time in terms of the magnitude of the problem, coupled with what is going on currently in Washington right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Anybody else with questions or comments on the budget? Okay, well, that's a perfect segue. We addressed this a little bit last week, but just wanted to flag it for everyone again. March 14th is the deadline to avoid a federal government shutdown. So we're all watching that closely, and obviously waiting to see how that will impact things for the General Assembly. And then just continuing to kind of watch and account for the impact of Department of Government efficiency impact on federal workforce layoffs, which have led to thousands of jobs lost in Maryland. So if anyone has comments, concerns, or even like resources or anything they would want to share in the chat for this, please feel free to go ahead and share those in there. And that concludes my part of the presentation. So if you have any questions or requests for bills you want to see tracked or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to Ben Yellen. Here's his email and his phone number. And now I will give it over to Heather, Michelle, or Summer to open it up for any other conversations.
Perfect. I can jump in here. We don't have too much else to cover beyond what's been discussed. So thank you everyone for being here. And thank you, Annette, for that great presentation. Yes, please, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, just following up on legislation. I think I brought to the committee's attention 3 meetings ago. The State Department of Planning had introduced legislation basically undoing the 12 planning visions that have been part of state law going on 30 years now and replacing it with 8 new planning principles. Legislation, as originally introduced, failed to recognize that a little more than half of the state's land area is working farm and forest land. And so working with members of the Senate committee and more recently the House Environment and Transportation Committee, House Bill 286 and Senate Bill 266 have been amended. The Senate bill contains compromise language that we worked out with the department and senators to recognize that farm and forest land as well as fisheries are significant to be recognized as part of the state's planning process. And MDP will be producing implementation manuals during the next several months on each of the 8 new planning principles. The House ENT committee adopted the Senate language related to what I just spoke about in the land principle, and also added some additional language in the ecology principle, speaking to the conservation of farms and forests and waterways. That language is not is fine with the farming and forest organization. So I expect that will be adopted by the Senate. That House bill is on 3rd reading tomorrow before it heads over to the Senate for concurrence. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention since we talked about it. I think it was 3 meetings ago.
Yeah, that's a great update. It sounds like a lot of really positive progress. So thank you for closing the loop on that, Steve. And we'll look to see how that makes its way through the final steps here. So thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else before we close out have any updates that they want to provide or things that may not have been covered on the agenda that they want to share with the group? Okay.
Yes,
Oh, go ahead, please, Serge.
yes, I've been, make myself visible, but not Charlie from Charlie's Angels. So, oh well, it'll come up. I have reached out to Ben about giving a presentation on the legislative landscape regarding food insecurity to MAFRAC, and so we're just going to be working on firming up a date. And I just want to thank the group for allowing me the chance to come to these meetings, and I'm also looking forward to what he has to say. Because MAFRAC is a regional organization representing the DMV. So just hearing what one state and one state legislative body is doing to address food insecurity issues in light of what's happening in Washington would give us all great insight on what's coming down the pike for other states and also other communities too. So big thanks and big kudos to him for being willing to do this for us in advance.
Well, thank you, Serge. More good news to close out the meeting on. So that's great to hear. And thank you for all that you're doing to coordinate more regionally. And I guess to close us out, the one thing I will just share real quick are the emails that you can reach out to us at if there's anything else that comes to mind after this meeting that you want us to be able to share out to the group. You can reach out to the FSRC email, which is listed here, or the resilience email. We're checking those. So thank you all. And if there's nothing else, I think we can close it out a few minutes early here.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining and contributing as we continue to understand what's going on in Annapolis.
Hopefully you guys get out there and take a walk. It's a beautiful day out there.
Yep, thanks, Serge. Good to see you.
You too.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.